But now I got another one now, and you may need to help me with this because this may be with your, again, photographic memory for some of these things. You may be able to help me put two and two together here. But we got another email from one of our listeners, Elijah Odinade. And I say that with conviction because he parenthesed a pronunciation guide for it. Elijah Odinade from Norcross, Georgia, who wrote, I'm a younger listener, 24 years old, and enjoy your takes on wrestling and mostly agree with you on how it should be presented. But I was recently talking to my dad about the wrestling they got in Nigeria after he moved there from the U.S. when he was 5. Apparently, the wrestling on TV in Nigeria during the 1980s was reruns of the Cleveland-based IWA with the Eddie Einhorn, Pedro Martinez collaboration that we've talked about a number of times, Brian, on a program. He says, which led wrestlers like the Mighty Igor, Mil Mascaras, Jerry Lawler, and Ox Baker. I think his dad might be misremembering on Jerry Lawler. Did he ever work for the IWA or ever tour Nigeria?
He must be confusing Jerry Lawler with Luscious Larry Heinemimi.
He might be, because at that time he was going for that gimmick. And Ox Baker, but Igor Mascaras and Ox Baker, yes, to become very popular in Nigeria. Because of this, a major local promoter in Nigeria named Power Mike. Do you remember that name?
I remember a different guy named Power something.
Well, hold on. We'll get there and we'll discuss this.
Oh boy.
But Power Mike had wrestled in the US and began to book former IWA talent, including a match between Ox Baker and local star Power Uti.
That's who I know.
UTI. Apparently in Nigeria, they have a different phrase for a urinary tract infection, but he would Power Uti. And a match between Mighty Igor and Ray Apollo, both of which caused riots.
Well, hold on. Ray Apollo? Which
Ray Apollo was the, oh, God damn it. You're thinking Phil Apollo, Doink the Clown.
Okay, yeah.
No, but that's easier than giving you Ray Apollo's biography off the top of my head. But nevertheless, Elijah's question is, why would IWA be the American promotion being aired in Nigeria instead of bigger promotions like the WWF or Crockett? And what do you know about Power Mike and Americans going to wrestle in Nigeria in the 1980s? And he included a picture in an office somewhere. I mean, it's paneling with distinguished people's picture on the wall. And there's like these 3 Nigerian people on either side of Mil Mascaras and Mighty Igor, and they're just smiling, beaming. So it looks like some kind of official welcoming thing by some municipality or something. And, but that's the tapes that the IWA made from what would that have been? 75, 6, and 7, that era, were on TV in Nigeria in the 1980s. And I think this may have been maybe Igor's last run as far as chronologically where he was on top. And that's not unheard of, but Brian, the point being, the fact that WWF wasn't on TV in Nigeria and 10-year-old tapes of the IWA doesn't have as much to do with popularity of wrestling at the time as it does who knew somebody in a right fucking place. Howard Brody got me more money for reruns of my Smoky Mountain Wrestling shows 2 years after we'd gone out of business from fucking Germany than I ever made airing it when we were actually going. That's why a lot of the WWF guys after the 80s, when the guys had left the WWF or they'd been gone a few years or whatever, they were still names in the international wrestling world because they were sometimes behind on the tapes in places. But this one, I don't know. That's why I asked if you remembered Power Mike, because I don't know whether, and somebody else may be able to help. I don't know whether he wrestled in the US or not, but he may have told the people over there that he did. But he was the guy who was promoting Nigeria at one point in the mid 1980s. And this Power Uti guy would occasionally get a picture in the magazines over here or whatever. But these guys that hadn't been on TV in 10 years or featured in a major deal were suddenly getting to go over there and get payoffs on these tours where that was the only wrestling at the time that people in Nigeria knew. Do you remember what they started wrestling in Puerto Rico with?
What they started wrestling in Puerto Rico before WWC? They had Rocka come in there, didn't they?
Well, yeah, but that was the way that WWC, some way or another. And again, for chapter and verse, I'm free to read an email from an expert on a subject, but in broad terms.
Yeah, Matt Farmer, if you're listening, he knows his Puerto Rico history.
Well, there you go. But Carlos Colon formed and Brian Solomon is on the book he's doing and has done and is going to be available soon on Gorilla Monsoon, has some details on Puerto Rico territory in the 70s, but this didn't particularly come up. The point being, in the early, 1973, 72, 73, Carlos Colon, they bring full-time wrestling to the island. Before, the Florida office had been there back in the 40s and the 50s or whatever, but just, spots here and there or a tour here and there, but for a local promotion. But somewhere, and Gorilla Monsoon was involved early on and had an interest in it for many years. But the story in some way is that the tapes that the people in Puerto Rico had been seeing on television before that Carlos began this venture were some of the old fucking Capitol Wrestling tapes from the Northeast in the early 60s with like the Fabulous Kangaroos and Rocka. That's why Rocka got the last full-time run of his career in Puerto Rico, because 10, 12-year-old tapes had been airing of him, and he was still a star to those people because they knew no different. And Miguel Perez, because Miguel Perez was their top local babyface when they first started, and he and Rocka had been the tag team. So the Kangaroos, it wasn't even the same two Kangaroos, but Al Costello, and by that time it was Don Kent. They were the team that Rocka and Perez were working with in Puerto Rico to kick that off, because that had been the program from like 15 years before. So in those days, before the worldwide interwebs and YouTube and all of this stuff, you had countries where if they didn't see it on their TV, they didn't know what was going on. And when they saw it, they didn't know how old it was. There was no way to find it. And you think people in fucking Nigeria in 1984 are going to have a burning desire to find out how old their wrestling show is. So that's how that was able to be done. And in a lot of cases, it depended on if you knew somebody in TV syndication or somebody in an office that would supply a tape, and so there was an in with a local, whatever, rather than just TV stations weren't sitting there pondering all over the world, how do we get a wrestling show? And world class. Remember when, for a time, they, including us, I, were the number one TV show in Israel, right? From what, 1983 to 1986? Because
they said that the fighting would stop when World Class came on. It's probably an exaggeration to some extent, but it also probably isn't to some extent.
But it wasn't like the wrestling reporters saying that. It was like the fucking, I'm not saying it was even true, but in some case there was some effect. It was the public officials saying that, and people being quoted in the newspaper when asked about the popularity of the Von Erichs and World Class Wrestling in fucking Israel. And, they had the Von Erichs over as guests of various dignitaries and etc. And that happened because Channel 39 that was doing remember, we've talked about this and it's been on the Triumph and Tragedy of World Class Wrestling or whatever. But they had for years had television on Channel 11 in Detroit, Channel 11 in Fort Worth on Saturday nights, KTVT, and that was a show from the Will Rogers Coliseum. But when they rebranded to World Class is when they got that syndicated show, the 1 hour World Class Championship Wrestling, which was produced by and syndicated by the ownership of Channel 39 there in Dallas. And that's besides how they began getting on in Boston or Las Vegas or whatever the fuck, and they had the production upgrades, and that story's been told. But because, again, I don't know how this whole odd bedfellow relationship began otherwise than Fritz was noted for being, and the Von Erichs were Christian, except when they all weren't. But the local religious community was into it, and Channel 39 was owned or overseen by some kind of Christian organization. So they ended up a fucking religious TV. That's sacrilegious, isn't it? A fucking religious TV organization syndicated a show, a pro wrestling show produced by the Von Erichs into the Holy Land. Brian, am I making this up? Just testify I'm not making this up.
You're not making this up, no.
Okay, so then they became the #1 TV show in fucking Israel. And the people were going crazy over the Von Erichs. And that's when we were there, is when they announced they were going to do their first tour, which is another thing. When I told the story, I credited the lousy payoff we got at Texas Stadium and our lack of upward mobility from what we were doing, and we had Charlotte waiting for us. But another thing that may have hastened it a little bit is they announced that they were going to do the first world-class tour of Israel, and I thought, which they did do. We left July 1st. I think they were over there by August or September, weren't they? But I said, oh, fuck no. Because again, me and Bobby from Huntsville and Dennis from Florence, Alabama, and we could see.
When did Mike Von Erich get hurt? Because that's when they were over there the first time, right?
Well, it was. We were living. Well, get hurt which time?
His shoulder. When his shoulder popped.
Okay,
out.
The shoulder. I think that was right after we left, wasn't it? Fall of '85.
Okay, I thought it was maybe before then, but you're probably right then. Okay.
No, see, we worked with him before he had brain damage, and still, I'm going to look it up though. Maybe I'm misrepresenting it, but he wasn't the sharpest knife in a drawer to begin with. But nevertheless, we were thinking that because we saw how they ran the fucking rodeo arena in Sulphur Springs, Texas, or whatever. We're thinking they're going to take us over to fucking Israel with these boys and Gino, and could there going to be some kind of international incident, or because we're the biggest celebrities and it's the front page of the paper, we're going to be the victims of a terrorist attack? And I'm going to say they're not going to read in the Louisville Courier-Journal, noted local personality locked in closet and pissed on by terrorists. We'll just go to Charlotte and stay in this fucking general side of the world. And when they went over there and did that tour, they had fucking soldiers. I'm, again, not sure of the exact terminology for the military over there, but they had some type of people in uniforms armed with machine guns going along with them from the hotel to the fucking building, and on the floors of the hotel by the elevator and shit like that outside their doors. No, thank you. I want to be at the Hampton Inn where a drunk CPA wanders in at 2:00 to use the candy machine. The fuck? Did you check on that at all?
I can't find an exact date. It's probably right after you left because August 30th, I have an article here from the LA Times. That's when he was critical after surgery and he got the toxic shock.
Yes.
So that's August 30th. So obviously.
And okay, and I know why I remember, because I remember watching that unfold on World Class Wrestling on Pedicino's Superstars of Wrestling block. I was living in Atlanta. That was between July and October of 85.
That makes me jealous. Just the idea you had that anyone who lived there had that Joe Pedicino block where you had everything. Just everything that was available, he had it on that block.
Yeah, I had his block. I had his nose. No, Joe was good to me. Joe was a nice guy. He wanted to desperately to be more. I don't. There was an element of narcissism, but also just to contribute to wrestling, and he wanted to be a bigger deal, a bigger promoter, a bigger TV personality, a bigger proponent of wrestling than he was always, and he gave it multiple fucking, good old fashioned tries. But somebody tweeted a picture the other day of him and Olu Oleani in a business office, but here's the thing where I hate to
a business office.
Well, yes, but when we tell the story, I always try to just explain that, yes, Joe did get paperwork. It may be knowing what I know now, but what I didn't know when I was a 29-year-old fucking kid, but suspectified was it his bogus ass paperwork, and you could check it out now with the internet. But in those days of, oh my gosh, it's international dealings, this is important, people didn't know. Point being, Joe saw this fucking guy in an office behind a desk wearing a suit, because I remember when I saw him, he was wearing a suit. If you didn't examine the preposterousness of what was being proposed, he did look like somebody that could have been important, been a businessman and have access to some level of funds. So it wasn't just completely ridiculous for Joe, but Joe was smoking the hopium. And he wanted to believe this. And that's, and a lot of people don't even know what we're talking about, do they, right now?
Oh, we somehow...
Do we even have time to get into it?
We've discussed it in the past. I was just going to say it's amazing we circled back to Nigerian wrestling.
Well, yeah, there you go. See? Hey, Elijah. Boom. Because... Okay, this makes even more sense because this guy was Nigerian. He wasn't doing a fucking accent, right? He had the accent and he had the name. He could produce a driver's license. They don't name people Olu Oleani in fucking Pittsburgh or whatever. This is 1990, right? 90 or 91. One of the other.
91 is when GWF started.
Okay, but so whenever he started talking to Joe, so there in Nigeria, wrestling has been so big, apparently, from what Elijah just said in the picture that he sent. And it was, the IWA, but they didn't know it was old. But point is, wrestling's hot. And then this Olu comes over here, and I don't even know if they ever found out what he really did or what he really had or where he really went or whatever, right? But he in some way thought, well, I can be a wrestling promoter with this large, jolly gentleman, and I will convince him I have funds and he will make me a bunch of money so I don't actually have to spend it or something like that. And then, oh shit, he really had to come up with $25 million or some bullshit.
It's amazing how much we still don't know about things that were happening internationally in the 70s and the 80s, even in the 90s. I remember the story because even back then no one knew. Was it, I think maybe South Africa, I could be wrong, Terry Funk lost to Hulk Hogan when Hogan was with New Japan and Terry was with All Japan. And Terry was okay doing it as long as it didn't get back to Japan.
Yeah.
And Hogan, I think he accused of leaking it back to Japan. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember that story?
Yes. The basic gist of it, which is that. And there was, Kevin Sullivan used to talk about being on international tours with in places that I didn't even know they had places, and because like he knew Steve Ricard, who from New Zealand, who you don't have to just if you're a pro wrestling promoter in some of these parts of the world, it doesn't just have to be your home country. You know, some guy gets in contact with you from wherever the fuck. Oh, it's this general area, but I got the contacts. So there have always throughout the year, even back in the pioneer days, you see the clippings now with the Londos book and so many of the historical books that have been printed where they left and went to this fucking country or spent 3 months touring Europe or whatever. A local promoter somewhere, even if they're not a wrestling promoter, finds a way to make a contact with somebody who has the wrestling connections or vice versa. And then that shit would happen. And especially as American TV got big. And that's the thing I'm trying to remember. I think they didn't have color television in Puerto Rico, color broadcasting until sometime in the 70s, I believe. So, and I'm
Same
happy
thing
to be
with
corrected
Australia.
on that also.
Same thing with Australia. All that classic footage from the early 70s is black and white.
So you could sell if somebody worked in one of the offices got a hold of 25 or 30 of their fucking tapes, masters, they could have sold that shit to goddamn Bolivia. If Cola Quariani's coming to town. You got anything to sell him? Whatever the fuck. And then somebody did a tour of Bolivia. A lot of this shit's lost to fucking history.
And the other thing is we talk so much about the tapes that were erased, the tapes that were taped over, the master tapes that are gone. How much money was really left on the table in the 70s and 80s, or even just the 70s, with guys that could have made money internationally, let alone if there was any syndication money in America at that time for wrestling? IWA was really the only example, actually, in a lot of cases. But was there money left on the table? Jerry Jarrett erased all those shows. Mike LaBella erased all those shows. Could they have had a second life?
Well, yes, and it would have needed someone to work those international markets to try to sell the wrestling tape, whichever one it may be, as just a standalone program, because most of those territories, even if you'd have called anybody but maybe Vince Sr., Mike LaBelle probably may have seen the value in it because he was from Los Angeles, but I don't think he wanted to work that hard from all the accounts I've heard. But Vince Sr. would have been the best example because he had one of the bigger operations. You would normally, if you were a promoter and sent your tape out somewhere, you would expect to take your talent there to do a fucking tour or whatever. And most of the territories producing television, if it's Australia, there was an NWA promoter there. If it was New Zealand, same thing. Whatever. Are they going to go to England? Well, they don't fucking know, right? So it's considered an international event when Vern goes over into Canada. So it would have needed some agent or somebody to have said, I can sell this just as a standalone program to the TV networks or stations over there. They're not going to get live tours, but do they want people to just watch it because it's good wrestling? And then it has to be one of the better programs. And then again, a lot of the overseas television makes the people in fucking American television look like Boy Scouts. They're over there. What are you going to do? Come get the fucking money? Fuck you. You have to really know who to deal with and what the thing. Howard went through all kinds of shit when he was syndicating the New Japan television program for all those years, him and Matsuda.
Was Bill Behrens international or was he just domestic?
No, well, I'm not going to say that Bill has never stepped across the border and gone, into the other countries or whatever, but primarily he was domestic television and helping with stations in all 50 states, but not international distribution and or chasing those people to get paid. but nevertheless, and there just wasn't anybody really offering to do that and be the go-between. What it would usually be is, like I said, one of those promoters in another part of the world, or one of the boys that's come back, and Kevin Sullivan was able to facilitate, come back and said, "Hey, I know so and so over there, and I bet you I could get us booked for such and such, and we could have a tour or whatever. Let me see if we can put the," and that just would happen that way. And then finally, toward the '90s, Vince always, from the early expansion, wanted to be in Europe, but in the '90s is where they really started just going a variety of places around the world. And I'm talking with the television program,
Yeah. Even
and sometimes
WCW.
with live events. But
Remember when WCW started sending their stuff, I think, to England? It kind of blew up for a while.
yes, because and that was under TBS, because they understood the value of international television, and but they just didn't understand the value of having a good fucking wrestling company. So that's, yeah, all of those things. There was, if we think it was crazy in the United States for wrestling, think about that all these other places that was going on all over the world for so long, and the histories that we don't even remember from Spain and France and all of that type of thing. There's always a bunch of fucking nuts involved. Speaking of a bunch of nuts involved, Brian,
Yeah.
I'll have you know that the March merch sale is ending soon at jimcornette.com, because the month of March is marching to a conclusion. So if you want to get $5 off on the Behind the Curtain graphic novels, autographed, only $19.95, and the free 2-hour classic wrestling DVD with every action figure that you purchase, you need to hurry up. But we've got some nice plans for maybe in about 4 weeks or so. Hopefully, I got to get on the ball. Some vintage and or one-of-a-kind merchandise is going to be part of our spring sale coming up soon, because, again, I'm trying to make some room in the vault. Things are out of control. But in the meantime, Brian, we have, at long last, I would play my drum roll, but you'll complain that my audio, even though my speed is 947 over 899, oh, your audio. But we have what the people have been clamoring for all this time: brand new show merchandise to show your undying and even undead support of our fine programming.
That is correct. Finally, by popular demand, we have some new stuff, and there will be a whole lot more in the weeks and months ahead. You may hear the wind behind me. Everyone's excited.
I was about to say, an ill wind is blowing behind you. Is that something wicked this way comes, or?
I'm not exactly sure, but you can go to ArcadianVanguard.com to get it directly, but we are on Shopify, of course. So if you just use the Shop app, we should be in there. We should be on YouTube pretty soon. Everywhere else, of course, social media. But for the first time, we have official Drive-Thru shirts, official Jim Cornette YouTube channel shirts, with a lot more to come. We've heard people demand hoodies and hats and designs and everything over the years.
Hold on now. Don't let them just start making demands this soon into this thing. We have to retain some kind of control here. They can't just become a mob.
These are old demands. I'm saying we've been keeping track of the demands over the years.
I'm an older man. And I want I want to fucking have a little goddamn breathing room here. We can't just be caving into every demand. Now, we've already got what is the Drive-Thru logo shirt. That's a stunning, stunning piece of apparel. Well, two different ones.
Some people like the logo on the front. Some people don't. So we have one where the logo is on the back and it's just a little logo over the breast. But
the breast. Well, now you're talking.
So 2 options right now, and also one of the big things, the very first since 1990, Jim Cornette t-shirt in white. Because there haven't been too many white t-shirts with Jim Cornette on it. Get it right now. There'll be other colors, other designs to come. But
you don't just act like it's a white fucking shirt. It's a white shirt with the design on it. Corny, by our own Travis Bickle.
Did you see that AEW are selling it's pretty much a blank white shirt and at the bottom of the shirt, like on one of the corners, it says Death Riders.
Oh, good. Well,
it's a white t-shirt that barely says anything. If your shirt's tucked in, it doesn't say anything. Death
well,
Riders.
that's what I'm thinking is that that's the way to go ahead and try to get them some merchandise money. But at the same time, nobody wants to display that on their person. So it's a play where you can, like, maybe they ought to do one of those flaps where you can tuck it under your crotch and button it so your shirt tail doesn't come out. But back to our shirts. We got the Drive-Thru logos, and you don't need a monkey on your back when you got a corny on your back. And also, and the corny shirt. So I was trying to explain this to these people. And how have we ever told the people, or do we just assume that they know how to spell Arcadian Vanguard?
Well, if you can't spell, there's a dictionary that Jim can sell you right now. Go, Jim.
Look at here. American Heritage Dictionary, 3rd edition. I'm going to look up Arcadian. Arcadian. Authorization. Avuncular. I've gone too far. Hold on. A taint. I didn't even know a taint was a one word. I thought it was 2 word. Like, oh, that's a taint. Anyway, well, I thought I was going to be able to find this quicker.
It's
I
an
was going
exciting
the wrong
segment.
way.
Great job. But once again,
It's
the
an
shirts are
exciting
available
segment.
right now. You can go to our social media.
Archaeology, archaic, archangel,
Jesus.
archbishop, flogging the bishop. Point being, we got these fine t-shirts. If you go to arcadianvanguard.com, or if you go to the Shopify spot in the shop, is what you said?
That's right. We are available through Shopify, so wherever you get your finest products, the Shop app, we are there too. And
oh, the Shop app. That's right. I used to have a Shop Vac. Is that anything like a Shop app?
I don't know what that is. What's a Shop Vac?
A Shop Vac. It sucks up all of the fucking the water and the dirt and the mud and the muck or the screws or the ping pong balls or whatever you've spilled in your shop. The Shop Vac. It vacuums them up. You've never seen it's a tub-like structure.
It sure is.
Where with a long hose, and you could even suck up water. Let's say that your basement is leaking, and you can suck up the water with the Shop Vac and carry it out and dispose of it out there.
Well, once again, like we were saying, you can go to the Shop app and just put Jim Cornette in. You'll see the official Arcadian Vanguard shirts. Of course, you can put Arcadian Vanguard in. Go to arcadianvanguard.com. The links are on our social media accounts, and there'll be more posted as we introduce more things down the road. And this should be fun. This should be exciting, and it gives us a chance to do some really creative stuff we wanted to do for a while.